Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus. The age of heroes has dawned, and the quest for optimal wellness continues here tonight with Ryan Foley on Herculean Physique. But before we get to Ryan, I'm going to be reviewing a book. Several years ago, my wife Athena gifted me with Retro Stud, a hardcover book by David Chapman that celebrates muscle movie posters worldwide. It's a wonderful book, garishly colorful, atmospheric, and evocative, full of historical tidbits, a worthy tribute to the peplum era I love so much. Thank you once again, O Wonderful Wife. I read it again and again and enjoyed each rereading. And yes, I must admit that sometimes I just skimmed through the pages and looked at the pictures. As I absorbed the book, one of the realizations that struck me is how interchangeable the protagonists of Muscle Man films truly are. These movies were marketed under different names in different countries. For instance, Hercules could also be, or may have originally been, Machiste, Goliath, Samson, Ursus, Attila, etc. This demystified the syncretic viewpoint of the ancients for me and rendered it intelligible. It's not too difficult to imagine that something very similar happened in antiquity. I've since given copies of this tome to other peplum enthusiasts and have also included copies as giveaway tomes for some of our social activities. A trivia point, though the earliest film in this genre goes back to 1914, 1959, the year both my wife and I were born, is considered the dawn of the peplum renaissance. Considering the pivotal role these flicks played in my life, I am greatly honored by this. Onwards to Ryan Foley. Greetings, Ryan. How are you today?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and as always, I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Well, it's let me just say this is fantastic for me as well. It's nice to be able to see you
Yes,
for the first time since we've been doing this, strictly through phone calls. So I finally caught up to what that be a 2021 technology by jumping on Zoom. So just a few years late, but I'm excited to talk with you this evening.
I'm excited too, and you're going to tackle some basic questions tonight about bodybuilding and exercising.
Right. Yeah. So before we get started, before I jump into the meat and bones of what I want to talk about, which is how to go through and build your own workout. One of the things that we've talked about here in the past is that whenever I go through and I'm looking for things to talk with you about, it's been incredibly inspiring for me. So that's one of the things I really appreciate about our friendship is that this is an opportunity. I think without me going through and doing these interviews with you, I want to find something exciting to bring to people, on a regular basis. So I think by having these conversations with you, it's improved my journey that I've been on, and hopefully that's radiated out to other people that have been followers of you. And so sometimes it's a question of, do I find these articles or do these articles find me? And so one of the things that came across, and I was like, oh, okay, this has got to go in because I found it to be tremendously interesting. And I felt like it was certainly on brand for the types of shows that you do. And so that's the tale of Sisyphus. And so for those who don't know, Sisyphus was a king that was
Mhm.
condemned by the gods to eternally push this boulder uphill. And in fact, even that name, it's been attributed to a Sisyphean effort. It's where you're going through and you're doing something that really doesn't seem to have a whole lot of a point to it. And so Sisyphus goes through, and that torture that he was intended to go through, this punishment that was put upon him, it was that's how the gods saw it. They saw it as a punishment. And so in 1942, Albert Camus wrote a philosophical essay called The Myth of Sisyphus. And in this, Camus kind of rethought Sisyphus' story and cast him not as an eternal victim, but as more of having he more embraced him more as a hero. So he started thinking about him from a hero's perspective. And the reason why he did this is because he never gave up trying. And so, if we think of it this way, the gods intended to punish Sisyphus, and it was his way basically of flipping them the bird. and going, okay, so you're going to go through and you're going to inflict this punishment upon me. So instead, I'm going to turn it into something useful. So Camus was a philosopher, and he believed that the world was insane. He felt that it was random, it was chaotic, and it made no inherent sense. And so, as a result, one of his quotes is, "Those who attempt to sit back and make order of it are all doomed to failure, because the world, in its misery and absurdity, will swallow you whole." So clearly, this guy was fantastic at parties. Just would have been a great conversation. Real upbeat guy. But then so instead, but what he was trying to impart on the people was, if you take pride and joy and purpose in little things that you can do, there are a few things that you can control. Okay, so we understand that. So Camus believed that if something can be performed in sorrow, it can also be performed in joy. And so Camus imagined that initially Sisyphus probably saw his task as a chore because he was clinging too much to the memory of the world. And so, as his description was, if melancholy rises in your heart, that is the rock's victory. So instead, we have to accept that there is no tragedy in having to start again, as long as you start again. So Sisyphus goes through and he defies the gods by giving his own life in the underworld meaning, by making each step more important than the final goal. And so Camus notes that the moment that you take control over the rock and you start pushing it again, you become the hero in this story. And so, as Camus was saying, and this is a quote from him, he said, "I leave Sisyphus at the foot of the mountain. One always finds one's burden again, but Sisyphus teaches the higher fidelity that negates the gods and raises rocks. He too concludes that all is well. This universe, henceforth, without a master, seems to him neither sterile or futile. Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of that night-filled mountain in itself forms a world. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy." So
Wow.
what I believe what he's saying there is that you have to enjoy the journey that you're on. It's not the destination. It's getting there. And in rolling back to what we were talking, I mean, so in my opinion, by going through and having to do this over and over again, and Sisyphus was probably yoked as hell. I mean, his legs and his butt and all that was probably just thick, because he was so strong after, moving this boulder over and over and over again. And so there's a certain point in time where I think we all have these moments, where it's like, oh, what are we doing here? What is it? And not to go too deep down into the existential crisis of it all, but why are we doing all this? And from an outsider looking in, lifting weights is pretty silly when you think about it, because what are we getting, from it? We took the weight, we picked it up, we put it right back down. So we didn't move it a substantial amount. We just put it back where we found it. And so in that regard, it can be, it's a strange thing for us to go through and do all this from the outside looking in. But then when we're trying to go through and improve ourselves, we're trying to go through and make ourselves better. And so by going through and doing that, it makes us a more complete individual. So it is the struggle that makes us so strong. It goes back to that old saying that I'll sometimes trite and kind of thrown around maybe a little bit too much, but it's still there's wisdom in the message of no pain, no gain. So you have to go through and it has to hurt in order for you to go through and make these improvements. So by going through and thinking about this, I wanted to go through it and try to start changing my mental mindset. And so if you can go through and if you could do that, you just have to change one word in the sentence that I'm about to say. So instead of saying, I have to go to the gym. Instead, say, I get to go to the gym. And so if you go through and you start thinking about all the stuff that you have to do, not as a chore, but as a way to go through and improve yourself, that's where you're going to find that happiness. Again, it's not the end destination, because if that's your goal, is to go to and create this perfect physical form, it can't be done. The greatest bodybuilders of all time have flat out said that. They're constantly chasing this perfection. So for me, it's not about going through and creating the perfect physical specimen, but it's the journey that you're on. And when you go through and you embrace that journey, then it's fun. It becomes something exciting that you look forward to when you're getting up in the morning before you go out and do your workout.
It is very synchronistic. Sisyphus has come up several times this week so far, and the week just started yesterday. The point that you're making is a point that I made talking about Conan and the Wheel of Pain in the first Conan the Barbarian movie with Arnold. That's basically the same thing. He could have allowed the wheel to defeat him, but instead he used the wheel to build up his physique till he became more powerful than his captors, and it elevated him to a different station in life that he might not have gotten had he remained in his village in Samaria. Yes, Sisyphus the myth is usually it's a hell in the sense that somebody who goes to work and doesn't like the work they're doing, it's the same type of thing. They remain busy all day, and then at the end of the day ends, but then when they come back, the work is still there and has to continue, and it's kind of like never ending. But if you're going to build your body in a gym or do some other pleasant activity to you, then it isn't painful in the sense that it's boring or saps your energy. It feeds your energy, and it makes you more than you currently are. So you're right. If you change your view even slightly, all of a sudden you're doing the same thing, but you're in a totally different place with it.
Right. And just a quick aside for all the regular listeners who are playing Hercules and Ryan Bingo. Yes, we did mention Arnold Schwarzenegger, so you can go ahead and get that stamp on your card. So we've managed to squeeze him into yet another conversation. But he is the greatest of all time, so that's why he's one of my idols. And so so shifting in from Sisyphus, so I think one of the biggest questions that you're going to get whenever you go through to begin starting a program. So again, just for your listeners here, I started my journey back in 2014. That's really when I started to get serious about the gym, and it was just because I had become, I wasn't happy with who I was as an individual, and so I was self-conscious about my weight, and so I decided, well, okay, I'm going to get in here and I'm going to start a program. And so I worked out a little bit in high school. I worked out a little bit in college, but it was nothing near the serious level that I've been doing since 2014. So I've been doing this for 9 years now. And it was just kind of a thing where I've stood on the shoulders of a lot of geniuses, where I've gone through and I've tried to design my own program based on something that works for me, because that's really the key. Everyone has to go through and they have to design a workout that's going to work for them. So you want to fit in the stuff that you like and eschew the stuff that you don't. Not saying so much that you should ignore leg day, because leg day, everyone has difficulty with leg day, but it is something that we have to do. So the trick is you got to find the right things in order to keep you energized about those things. And so whenever you go through and you want to start building a workout, I think the two main questions that are always going to be asked, especially by people whenever you're just getting started. And so I'm going to go through here and I'm going to lay out just a template for a program. And so when I explain it to you, once I get done, this is where you'll come back and you'll go, well, how did I not know this? And so for someone who's been on it for a really long time, sometimes you've got to, go back and forget about all the stuff that, you realize that you didn't know whenever you're first getting started into a program. So the way that I go through and I develop things, so the two questions we're going to inevitably get asked is going to be, how much should I be lifting, and what exercises should I be doing? These are the two big questions that I think are the big hurdles that people have to get over. So obviously the amount of weight that you're going to lift, We've talked about this in the past, so I would, but just to glaze over it real quickly, if you want to get really strong, you're lifting extremely heavy for a small amount of reps. If you're looking for hypertrophy, which is kind of like a balance between leanness and strength, your rep range is going to be between 8 and 12. And so what you're doing is you're lifting for amount that you can lift between 8 and 12. And then if you want to get leaner, you want the muscles, time under tension a little bit longer. So you're lifting more reps, more around the lines of, 15, maybe 20 reps. So, but in order to do that, you're less gaining weight. And so as far as the amount that you should be lifting, my advice is always the same. Regardless of what your goal is, the target that you should be shooting at is failure -1. So you can't just go through and pick up a 5-pound pair of dumbbells and lift it 12 times and say, well, the guy on the internet said that's hypertrophy. No, because you're straining to a point where the most that you can do is about 8 to 12 reps. And so if you're at failure -1, that's the level that you can be at. So then so the question is, what exercises should you be doing? I'm not going to break down as far as which is the best workout or which are the best exercises. Instead, what I want to talk about are the body parts, because these are the areas that you're going to be working out. And so what constitutes a body part? So as far as I'm concerned, there's 9 major areas. Now, as again, these are major areas. So there's going to be, different, little ancillary exercises. But for the most part, we're breaking this down into 9 different areas. So you're going to have your chest, you're going to have your back, you're going to have your shoulders, you're going to have your lats, you're going to have your quads, you're going to have your glutes, your biceps, your triceps, and your abs. So these are the areas that we're going to go through your work on. So depending upon your level, as a general rule, how much you want to work out per muscle per week. So if you're a beginner, you want to be doing 10 sets per week per body part. And once you get up into the intermediate area, you're going to want to be doing 15 sets per week per body part. And then when you get to the advanced level, you're going to want to be doing 20 sets per week per body part. Now, I'm a big fan of what we call antagonistic sets. This is something that I live and die by. So I want to talk about the antagonistic sets, and then I also want to talk about supersetting. Okay, so I believe antagonistic sets are where you pair exercises together. So for instance, in the list that I gave you there, let's take abs out of the equation, just so that way we're dealing with the 8 major areas here. So I'm going to work out, so in pairs. So let's say I do chest and back on one day. So if I'm going to do those with antagonistic sets, for every press that I do where I'm pushing the weight away from me, I'm going to counter that with an exercise where I'm pulling the weight towards me, say like a seated cable row. So I'm pairing a bench press with a seated cable row. The next day, I'm going to do shoulders, I'm going to do lats. And so what shoulders do, that's where I'm pushing the weight above my head, but then I'm also pairing that with an exercise where I'm pulling the weight down. So say like a pull-up or a lat pull-down. Quads and glutes, that's basically a fancy way of talking about legs, as we mentioned before. So quads are your legs, glutes are your butt. And so depending upon which hinge you're working there, whether it's knee flexion or hip flexion, that's the difference between that. So if you're pairing those two together, you're getting a good leg workout. And then if you go through and you're doing your biceps and your triceps, then you're going through and you're working your arms. So by going through and do this now, I believe in what's called supersetting. Supersetting is where you go from one exercise. So let's break that down into A and B. So we're going to do a chest exercise. We'll call that A. And then we're going to partner that with a seated cable row, which that's going to be your B. So as soon as I get done with my bench press, I'm immediately moving with as little rest as possible into exercise B. And by going through and doing that, what I'm doing is I'm allowing my chest to rest while I'm still keeping myself fairly well motivated. Because I'm trying to keep my heart rate elevated. So that way I'm staying in that anaerobic zone. So that way I'm going through and I'm burning fat. So by going through and doing this, I'm allowing my chest to rest for about, for about a minute, let's say. So You can even go through and you can add a third set into that if you wanted to. So say you're choosing a body part that's completely separate from what you're working on. So say it could be your trapezius muscles, maybe it's your calves, so you're adding in a third set. So basically what I would be asking someone to do is to give me 4 days a week. The CDC recommends that we should be doing at least 2 days a week with strength training, with resistance training. That's the buzzword that they use. Basically, it's weightlifting. So, but I'm going to ask you to give me 4 days. And so in that 4 days, so on the first day, we're going to do chest and back. In the second day, we're going to do shoulders and lats. On the third day, we're going to do legs. On the fourth day, we're going to do arms. And so by going through and doing that, now, as far as what exercise you choose to do, that's really up to you. But what you're attempting to do is to do 10 sets of each body part if you're at the beginner level. And so I went through and I was doing some calculations before I spent the last couple of weeks really kind of going through and timing things out. And so if you want to get 10 sets in, essentially what you're looking for, so let's just say it's a minute per exercise. So it's a minute to go through and do the chest exercise. It's another minute to go through and do the back exercise. And then you're going to go through and you're going to rest for 1 minute. Now, whenever I say rest, it's there was a recent study that was done that said where they went through and they put people on rest timers. So it's like, okay, so you have 15 seconds to rest. They went through and they're clocking them on a stopwatch and all that sort of stuff. And what they found really is that there was no tremendous benefit to going through and doing these pre-programmed sets of rest. So instead, what I would say is, again, you're trying to keep your heart rate elevated. So try to keep it for under a minute. But let's just say, okay, so we're getting started. So it's going to take us a minute to go through. Well, if it takes you a minute to do your chest exercise, and it takes a minute to do your back exercise, and then you're going to take a minute's worth of rest. Okay, so now we're into 3 minutes. And if you're going to do that 10 times, I've already eaten up 30 minutes of your workout. And so that's without throwing in any sort of ancillary exercises. So if you're like me and you started so you want to do a mile, say to get started. Now, we've talked in the past about how I'm not a runner by any stretch of the imagination. I prefer what I call my serial killer cardio, which is where I walk at a pretty fast pace, but I also do it at a steep incline in order for my heart rate to stay elevated. So, so it takes me 17 minutes and 30 seconds to go through and do a mile. And so that's at about 3.3 miles per hour. So it's a decent clip. I could go a little faster, but again, I'm just trying to get myself warmed up. Well, so there are 17 and a half minutes that I just spent on cardio. So now I've got 30 minutes to go through and do these 2 sections of exercises. And so now, I mean, if I'm only going to work out for an hour, that starts to cut in a lot into your time. So, and that's the thing. So everyone's really they're highly cognizant of the time and how much time they have available in a day. And so maybe you're a person that doesn't have 2 hours worth of availability to go through and work out in the gym. Or then there's also an issue of if you're just getting started, it's very difficult to have the stamina that you need in order to work out for 2 hours at a time. So when we're just getting started, so if you're going to do those 10 sets, so you've pretty much done it. And so let's bring abs back into the equation. Let's say, okay, let's take those 10 sets that we're going to need for the abs, but let's disperse them out amongst all our different exercises. So that way you're doing a little bit of ab work every single day. So if you can go through and if you can do that, that's how you can go through and get through this beginner level. But so as I mentioned at the start of going through and designing these exercises, well, so how do you get to the intermediate level, which is where now you're asking for 15 sets, or the advanced level where you're looking at 20 sets. So the only way that you can do that inevitably is you have to start adding in more workouts. Either that, or so you either have to start working out longer, or you have to start adding in more workouts. And by going through and doing this, so that's where you're able to start getting your numbers up and where you can get up to that intermediate level. And so the question that can come along is, well, so what types of exercises should we do? And there's a little bit of there's discussion back and forth as far as what should you do. So should you do 2 different exercises for 5 sets, or should you do 5 different exercises for 2 sets? It really doesn't matter because again, it's something that you want to do to feel comfortable with yourself. And so maybe if you're just getting started, okay, let's choose these 2 exercises and let's master these. And so if you can go through and if you can master those exercises, then what you're going through is, so now you have a wide variety to choose from. But typically what we're talking about in a situation like this is that, okay, so let's take, for instance, you have the pectoral muscles. And so with this, you have, so you have the upper pec fibers, you have the middle pec fibers, and then you have the lower pec fibers. Well, how you can target those depends upon the incline, decline of the bench. So if the bench is flat, it's hitting the middle. If the bench is inclined, it's hitting the top. And then if it's in decline, then it's hitting the bottom part of those chest fibers. Well, so if we think about it like that, okay, so let's do 3 sets at a flat bench. Let's do 3 sets at an incline, and let's do 3 sets at a decline. We just did 9 sets. So now we can go through, let's throw in a 10th set, and then we wrap up the chest movement. So that's our chest movement for the week. If you want to do the 10 sets. And so eventually, if you want to elevate up into that intermediate level, that's where you're going through, you're adding more exercises, you're adding more days where you're going through, you're going up to the gym. And so what you can do in that scenario is you can either break it down as so that 5th and 6th day could be considered improvement days. So that's where you could go through and you can start getting a few of those extra sets that will take you into that next level. Or you can go through and you can start breaking down. So let's go back to that original format. So if you have chest and back on day 1, and then you have shoulders and lats on day 2. So once you start in and you're starting on day 5, let's just do a half day of chest and back and shoulders and lats, where we're only doing 5 sets per body part. And so by going through and doing that, what you're going to find is that now you're starting to elevate up into that level 15. How we get into level 20 or the 20 sets, unfortunately, I can't tell you at this time because I still am at an intermediate level. I'd say I'm probably working out those exercises for probably 15 sets per week per body. So what I would have to do is I'd have to find a time to either work out in the evenings or switch to it or start getting up a little bit earlier so that way I can go in and spend time. But in order to do that, I have to develop my stamina so that way I can work out for longer than the 60 minutes that I typically do.
Makes sense. It all makes lots of sense. And I'm continually having to adjust my workout at this particular point in time. Like, for instance, I went to the doctor because I pulled my back. I discovered that I have all sorts of problems on my back. Like I have arthritis in my lower spine. I have 2 discs that are bulging. I have stenosis, and then I also have bone spurs. So I've had to be doing much lighter than with the weights, and it's very uneven. Some days I'm more or less fine. I'm walking a little slower, but I'm fine otherwise. And some days I can't make it up a flight of stairs without my leg muscles seizing. So
educate me again. What is stenosis?
Stenosis means a narrowness. So the nerves don't have enough room. The aperture for the nerves to pass through certain areas in the spine are very narrow. So it pinches the nerve.
Okay.
So in addition to bulging discs, I also have like narrow passageways for the nerves.
So is this a result of why are you having these afflictions?
I don't know. Just they said that it's my age, that when people get to be in their mid-60s, they sometimes develop things like that. And the lower back problems, including all the ones that I listed, are just part of getting old. So I have to learn how to deal with it and how to work around it. So until I have my physical therapy appointment, I've been watching YouTube videos on what to do for these different conditions and then experimenting with it. But heavy weights is out for a lot of what I used to do, not so much with my arms or my traps, but for a lot of the other body parts, they're impacted by moving my spine. So, I have to reduce. So I'm not giving up on my exercise, but I had to adjust it. And I'm hoping that, like many other times, that I defy the odds and I'm able to, return to where I was before. So I'm aiming for that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I hope that everything goes the way it's supposed to, but what you've brought up there is a pretty interesting point. And so we have to go through, and every once in a while, it is a good thing. It say anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, you're supposed to go through and really change up the regimen that you're doing in order to shock those muscles.
Right.
So that way, so that way they continue to grow and to adapt. And so that's one of the issues that if you come along and if you only do say 2 different exercises. So a bench press and a cable crossover. If you're only doing those 2 exercises, but you're doing those for 5 sets each, then whenever it comes time for you to change up your exercises, then you've got a larger array of exercises to choose from. Whereas opposed to if instead, so that's if you're doing 5 sets of 2 exercises, where if you're doing 2 sets of 5 different exercises, now it seems like you're constantly searching for new ways to go through
Right.
and shock those muscles. And this is where the strategy comes in, because there's a lot of different talk about as far as, what is the superior piece of equipment? Is it free weights? Is it machine weights? Because they actually, each one has its own, different, they each have their different advantages and their disadvantages. And so whenever you go through and you're shifting to these machine weights, because you'll see a lot of people say, oh, well, free weight, that's going to be the best because that allows you to, because you've got to stabilize the weight on multiple different axes as you're going through, you're lifting it, you're raising it back up. And that's absolutely true. So what you're doing is you're bringing in, you're recruiting a variety of different muscle fibers in order to go through and stabilize that weight. So people would say, well, why would you ever go back to a machine, bench press when you've been doing the free weight? And so the machine weight, what that allows you to do, since it's controlling, so you're only moving in that one singular plane of movement, that allows you to focus so much more on just that single muscle group. So if you want to go through and specifically target those muscle fibers by going through and switching up, that's where you're going to find that difference. And so that's where we're coming through and we're finding a variety of different ways. So if you're doing the free weights, you can shift up to the machine weight. And so that way you're just finding all those little different ways. So if you're using a barbell, you can switch to the dumbbell. And so that allows you to your arms, the hands to move independently. And so it's just going through and finding those different ways to go through and develop all these things. And that's where, to me, that's the fun of it. It's going through and finding someone on YouTube who's recommending an exercise. I saw one on Facebook today that Dr. Jim Stefani was recommending. And so I was like, I'm going to try that. Okay, that looks pretty interesting. And so it's going through and designing not around the exercises that you're doing, but I want people to focus more on the muscle groups as opposed to which exercise is the most efficient, which exercise is the best, because they're all good. All movement is good. All exercise is good. But instead, it's more important to go through and I'm going to focus on these specific body parts. And I think if you go through and you'll do that, you'll find that building a program is much more easier when you're targeting around the specific body parts as opposed to the exercises themselves.
I found the same thing, that if I focus on the body parts and I'll rotate them around, like sometimes my triceps I'll do with my chest, and then the next time I'll do my triceps with my biceps and do the antagonistic set. I like playing with different types of weights. Also, I have a barbell, I have dumbbells of different denominations, I have dumbbells that I can assemble if I need to. I have kettlebells, I have D weights, I have all sorts of bodybuilding toys, like Michael Del Russi, who does another Herculean Physique show, he recommended a device for me to use for my back, my lower back, because he had a similar condition. He used this device to basically stretch his spine and have the bulging disc parts that are bulging go back where they're supposed to. And although it didn't cure my condition, I've been using this every day now since this happened, and it's really helped. I'd say that 25% better just by using that on its own. And now I've integrated other types of things that I got from YouTube and telling me with a physical therapist.
And so something that I would add to that, because just today, one of my coworkers was going through my office, and I have an elastic exercise band. And so I have that hanging on my door.
Me too.
And she was like, yes, is that an exercise band? She's like, you're doing workouts here in the office? And okay, so again, let's go back to how do we get to 15? How do we get to 20? Okay, so let's cheat a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to go through, we're going to throw those exercise bands. And now, one, I love those things because it's a very different way to work out. They're very light, they're very portable. You can take them anywhere, you can shove them in a suitcase, and it's not this big heavy weight. The other thing that I really like about the bands is that if we think about it as far as like a light meat and a dark meat scenario. So you have your fast twitch muscle fibers and you have your slow twitch muscle fibers. And if I'm remembering this correctly, the slow twitch muscle fibers, that's the dark meat, that's the big, thick sections in there. And the fast twitch muscle fibers, that's the light meat. And that's what you're trying to stimulate through fast movement. Well, you have to be really careful if you've got a 20-pound dumbbell and you're going through and you're lifting this thing and you're doing barbell or dumbbell curls as fast as you can. You lose your grip on that thing. You're taking a window, you're putting a hole in your drywall, all that sort of stuff. So be careful with that. But with the bands, you can go a lot faster because you don't have to worry about causing any sort of damage. And so as a result, it's a very different pump. And so now, so let's say I want to get to 15 reps. Okay, so technically you can do a bench press with those bands. You take the bands, you wrap it around your shoulder, and then you're pressing out with the bands. Well, so if you want to get to 15, hey, I'm going to get I did 10 in the gym. I'm going to get my bonus 5. I'm going to get them while I'm at work. And so by going through and doing that, okay, now I got my extra reps, which gives me more time to go through. So whenever I do my improvement days, which is let's call that exercise day 5 or exercise day 6. I'm just going to go through and I'm going to hit all those areas that I haven't been able to hit as much, which gives me more time to go through and develop the traps, the calves, the forearms, doing stuff like that. So yeah, it's finding any little way that you can go through and squeeze in those extra reps. So that way, whenever you go to the gym, you can focus on other areas. So that's the other way where you can get to 15 relatively easy.
When I used to work in offices, I used to have a pair of dumbbells and bands in one of my desk drawers. And as soon as lunchtime came around, instead of going out and eating, sometimes I'd go out and walk around just to walk around and meditate. I used to take out my dumbbells and my bands, and I had an hour, so as much exercise I could put in there during my lunchtime, I put in during my lunchtime.
And I think that kind of becomes a little bit of the difference where you're going through and you're looking for times to go through and put those together. And so hopefully people can go through and they can find a way to go through and target those individual muscles, and that way they can get started and get rolling on a program. And I know that's sometimes it's a hard thing to do, but that's where I think it's important to go through and as I mentioned here in the past, the 4 pillars that I go through and I have built my program around, which is the physical, the social, the intellectual, and the emotional. So I want to go through and put all that together. And so by going through and doing that, it's developing this holistic style of training where it's not just me training my physical body, it's me going through and training my mind and trying to keep my emotions in check and doing all these things to improve myself better as an individual. And so one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because I feel this is very important, and I think sometimes going through and just identifying a problem is a very important thing. It's to go through and to bring attention to this issue that we're having. I recently saw a statistic that in Oklahoma, which is the area of the state that I'm in for any new viewers, the state of Oklahoma, we have topped where, unfortunately, we are #1 in the nation when it comes to abuse. And so it's one is too many, but so 49.1% of women and 40% of men in Oklahoma have identified as being a victim of the word that I'm looking for here. It's partner abuse. And so I think that is a terrible thing. And those are, it's a program, or those numbers were put out by the YWCA, which is the Young Women's Christian Association.
Mm-hmm.
So the YWCA down in Tulsa, which is about 45 minutes down the turnpike from me, they've started a program called LIFT. And LIFT is an acronym for Lifting Introduction Fuel Technique. So basically, the program overview says that LIFT is a program geared towards beginners looking to learn how to eat healthy and begin a strength training program. The program is for healthy, non-pregnant individuals who are able to get up to the floor without assistance, 13 years and up. So, and then what LIFT is doing is categorized as a periodization program. Periodization is a systematic approach towards strength and conditioning. The goal is to start with the foundation and build in intensity or load. And for this series, the progression will be towards load or strength. All phases will cover hypertrophy, strength, power, and end with rejuvenation. So I understand what they're talking about. They're talking about progressive overload, which I'm sure we probably talked about here. And so it's where you go through and you can lift until you get to this level. Okay, now we're going to go up 5 pounds. We're going to lift where we can get to this level. And so again, 49.1% of Oklahoma women have or are currently being victimized by domestic abuse. And the numbers here is 40.7 of Oklahoma men experience domestic violence in their lifetimes, including intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner, let's just call it assault, or intimate partner stalking. And Oklahoma ranks 3rd in the United States for the number of women killed by men in single victim, single offender homicides. Terrible, absolutely terrible. And I don't know how to. It makes me mad to know that this is happening to far too many people. So I'm inspired by Marvel heroes specifically, and by, well, superheroes in general, but none more so maybe than Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill played Superman in Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. He seems like a really cool guy. And he also played Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher, where he really substantially bulked up for that role. And so one of the things that he was talking about is that whenever you go through and you build all of that muscle, what you're doing is you're building confidence. You're building confidence in yourself, but it's not just for an aesthetic purpose. It's so that way you can go through and you can hit your mark every single time, because he wanted to do as many of his own stunts as possible. And so if you're going through and you're swinging that sword, you have to be able to hit that mark over and over and over again, take after take. So you have to have the stamina to be able to do that. And then you also have to be, otherwise you're going to injure your other stunt performers. But then also what they talk about, it's more than just an aesthetic. It is, and I have experienced this myself, going from a situation where I was not happy with my physical appearance. In many ways, I'm still not, but I feel like I'm improving. I feel like I'm getting healthier. But before, I would walk into the gym and I didn't feel like I belonged there because I didn't look like the other people that were there. but then I just kept going back because everyone's also wrapped up in their own stuff, man. No one's paying attention to you. That's the biggest thing. We're all dealing with our own things, man. And so, so as I kept going, I began to develop this, I began to develop this confidence and this strength. And by strength, what I mean is by emotional strength. Now, on TikTok, I did come across a video. Again, I'm not certain if I found this video or if it found me, but so there's a female bodybuilder, and she's on there, and so she calls herself she is a muscle mommy, and she calls herself that because she's taken her little baby muscles and she's grown them into big muscles by nurturing them and developing them, and and so I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. I like, this is, she's funny.
I like
so so one of the things that she said is that she gets a lot of people who will like come up to her like the grocery store, guys mainly, and they'll look at her and they're like, whoa, I wouldn't want to take on you. And then she kind of reveals the secret behind it is the fact that it's all aesthetic, because her muscles are designed for her to stand on a stage for 15 seconds and pose and look good. I'm not saying that she's not strong. I'm sure she is, and she's probably certainly stronger than other people that are completely untrained. But then I took what she was saying, and there's the saying that power perceived is power achieved. So I don't have to know how to fight. I just have to look like I know how to fight.
Mhm.
And then as a result, people are going to want to go through and leave you alone. So I'm not saying that women should go out there and should be beating up dudes. That's not but I don't understand why. I have to assume it's a control thing. I don't understand the thing about physical abuse. And I probably should have prefaced this with a trigger warning. So I'm sorry to anyone who I didn't do that for. But I can't wrap my head around that mindset of why abuse is such a prevalent thing. And the only thing that I can think of is I have to go back to nature. And, predators want an easy meal. They don't want, if you put up too much of a fight, they're going to go the other way because they don't want it. So they're looking to pick off the sick, the weak. That's how predators are. So I have to assume that this is how these guys are the same way, predators. And so if you can project that strength that is slowly developed through something like the LIFT program, that the Tulsa chapter of the WCA has. If you go through and you begin to develop yourself, I think I don't know. I can't explain it, but it seems to me like you would project this aura that says, don't bring it over here, because if you do, you're going to get bit. And so it's so that's the thing. I feel it is tremendously important. And so by going through and developing that self-esteem that comes from working out, I just think it would go through and improve people's lives, or at the very least, maybe help them get out of those terrible situations if they find themselves in.
Is there any organization that there must be if they're putting out programs. Are there any organizations that address this directly in Oklahoma?
I'm really not certain. I went through and I found these statistics and found them to be very disheartening. And so I dug just a little bit into the WCA, and that's where I found on their website where you could sign up for the LIFT program. It does, it costs a little bit of money. So, but still, I think it's kind of one of those things where you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your health to hopefully go through and make things better. And so by going through and doing that, but as far as a specific, just other than just doing a Google search, maybe for the WCA, why WCA, that would help people find it.
Here locally, I'm involved with things. I'm not involved with as many things as I was involved in before, but I'm still, pretty involved. And one of the things we recently did was we worked with the local public library to provide virtual mindfulness classes to people in our community. So, you register because the pandemic is still with us. We're just ignoring it now.
Right.
But it's still pretty much there. They're still taking steps to keep it safe. So it's virtual for now. And plus, more people are used to interacting virtually at present. So we started it for the fall and for the winter, and then we're going to look at what happens with that. And if it's something viable, we're going to push for the spring and the summer after that as well, so that it's going on. We also worked with our local library to alternate every few months one of their displays so that it has books on mental health that people can check out of the library. And our library system called Buckles, they have a website, and on the website there are links to every single mental health book in their system. So we have that, and we distribute it. And we're also working with the local library to get an updated resource directory on mental health resources in our county. So there are a few guides, but they're all out of date. So we're going to put something more recent together. And this is under the umbrella of Tenafly Stigma Free. And there we raise mental health awareness, and we also try to reduce stigma. So we're also going to be working with the schools to do something in the school setting and in other settings as well, so that eventually we were able to reach out and help our entire community. So there must be some structures like that, everywhere, I'm imagining.
I certainly think so.
Borough Hall is usually a good place to check. Whatever your local seat of government is, they usually have committees and groups and all sorts of things. That's why I check every now and then, see if I feel strongly about something, and then I just go as a guest, and then eventually, if they like what I'm saying or doing, they'll invite you to be part of the committee.
I think, and the fact that you do all that is awesome, and I like how we're shifting into this where we're starting to pay attention to mental health and how important all of that is. So I can see here that I know we're going to get closer on our time, and so again, as I mentioned, sometimes I go through and I find these articles, and sometimes I feel like the articles find me. And so just one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and this just came to me yesterday, so I'm still trying to go through and process all of this. So if you'll allow me to kind of stumble my way through this, we got together because I believe that the best way to teach is first. To go through, and you can tell a child not to do drugs, and they won't pay as much attention. But if Spider-Man's best friend is going down a very dark path as a result of drugs, and we're reading about that person's story, it tends to hold on to them so much better. And so story is this wonderful opportunity for us to go through and shine a mirror up against society. So over on Hulu, there is a television show called The Bear. And so I binged as much as I've been able to with so much stuff I've had going on. So I wasn't able to binge it in a traditional fashion. But I would try to grab episodes here and there. And so the first 2 seasons are all available right now. And so The Bear is basically Ted Lasso if it was set in a restaurant instead of on a soccer field. And so it involves this going through this building up of this restaurant. And of course, whenever they get started, they're all arguing, they're all fighting with each other. And then slowly they begin to see that this guy has the pathway. So he's going to go through and he's going to take us down this. And so they all begin to gel as a team. And then they all begin to start moving forward, and then so you begin rooting for their success. Well, in the storyline, I want to talk about this, but I also don't want to give away too many spoilers, for people who haven't seen it. But the lesson that one of the things that they try to explain in the story is that there's a sign, and I would equate it along the same line as the Believe sign that Ted Lasso had, that excellent show. And the sign is every second counts.
Yes.
And so when we go through and we talk about this, he had to polish the forks perfectly, because that's how it starts. Okay, because if there's a smudge on the plate, then they have to clean the smudge, and then they go through, and then by cleaning the smudge, they've now delayed, and so now this course is late, and so it becomes this snowball. So now, granted, I don't know anything about racing, but what I was thinking about was like the Indianapolis 500. Okay, well, so if you're a quarter of a second behind the leader every single lap, and they're doing 500 laps. Well, so, okay, so a quarter of a second doesn't seem like a whole lot, but when you start to add all those seconds up, all of a sudden you're losing by, 4 or 5 minutes. Well, in a race, that's a lifetime. You might as well, 4 or 5 minutes behind the leader. That's, you're never making that up. So to understand for the people for my closing segment, I'm not talking about hustle culture. I don't believe in that. I'll talk to any Olympian. What they'll tell you is that rest and recovery is extremely important. But what they're talking about is that every second counts. So in the morning, I'm going to make sure, is my sweat towel washed? Yes, it is. Are my gloves ready to go? Yes. Did I make my protein shake that I can take with me? Yes, because then if I have all that stuff done, I can get out the door that much faster. If I only have an hour to work out, then yes, every single second counts. And so I took a step back from that and brought it into more, it made me develop almost like an existential crisis where I'm sitting here thinking, it's like, because every second counts and we never get this moment again. So
Right.
what are you going to do? What are you going to do with this time that you have available? I'm one person, I can only do so much. There's only so much energy that I have in a given day. And so I'm making a really big push right now to finish my next novel so I can get that published in October. And so I go up and I do my workout, and then I go and I work my 9 to 5, I get home, I gotta do dinner and all that sort of stuff. And then, so what am I giving up? What am I choosing to do with my time I have available? And so that's when, okay, so maybe I can't play my game as much, or I'm gonna, I'm only gonna watch one episode of this show and then I gotta get to bed, that sort of thing. But and one of the things I won't give up, two things that I won't give up are my writing, because I love it so much.
And you're a great writer.
Thank you. That means a lot. And the other thing that I can't give up is my gym time. That's my time, because what I'm trying to do, every second counts. What I'm attempting to do is I'm attempting to extend the seconds that I have available, or the seconds that I do have available. I want to make sure that I'm as healthy as I can be to make those seconds the most that I can.
Enjoyable.
And
Yes.
so if you go through and you take a few things from this video, I hope the structuring of the body parts as to how to build your workout. I hope that's part of it. I hope you remember the legend of Sisyphus and how you can take a bad situation. I'm going to take that and turn it into a positive, so I can put the middle finger up to fate and say, okay, you tried to do this as a punishment, and then I'm going to turn this into something. I'm going to spin this as a goal. And then the other thing is that, man, every second counts. Every second counts. Please take your time doing stuff that you do, stuff that makes you happy. Even if it's a book that only 5 people are going to read, it's okay, because as long as you're having fun. And so if you're going through and you're developing yourself physically, intellectually, socially, emotionally, if you're doing all that, then everything will work out fine. It's going to take some hard work for people to get there, but I promise you, I'm living proof to say that journey.
And thank you so much for sharing your journey. I know I benefit from it, and you have fans who listen to the show, so they benefit from it as well. How can people reach you, Ryan? How could they find you? How could they read your books? And
how you share me on social media, on Facebook, that's probably the absolute best way. I don't know how many Ryan Foleys are out there on Amazon.com, but if you're looking for my novels, be it The Shadow Blades, Clown Zero, or my graphic novels that I've done in the past, through Campfire Graphic Novel and through our Camp Studios, I think they're all pretty searchable. They're all pretty linkable. So if you find one on Amazon, there's a pretty good chance you'll be able to find those.
thank you again, and we'll continue the conversation for a few minutes after we sign off. Okay. And thanks to everybody who's tuned in. This will be on YouTube by the end of tonight, so it'll be available for your viewing pleasure in another couple of hours. Thanks again, Ryan. I look forward to learning of your continued journey, and thank you so much for your generosity.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.